Alright, in this video what we're going to do is go over the basics of Visio. There are instructions in the class in Canvas on how to download and install the software. You can get it for free, so you don't need to buy it. But what we're going to do is go over just the basic tools you'll need to complete your assignment 2, making your ERDs for the problems in the homework assignment. So here we are in Visio. I'm just going to tell it that I want a new chart, and I'm going to go ahead and choose the crow's foot database notation. This is going to have all of our symbols built in for us. It's going to ask us US or metric units. I can't imagine that it really matters, but go ahead and create one and use it using US units. And you'll notice here on the side of our window we have our tools that we're going to need for this, and then we have our diagram itself. So what you do is you go ahead and drag your entities into place. Let me go ahead and zoom in so we can see what I'm doing here. Not that far in. And I'm going to go ahead and drag 3 entities in. I'm going to do an example from your textbook, students enrolling in classes. So I'm going to need 3 tables because students can enroll in many classes, and or classes will have many enrolled in it. So we need a linking table in between. So we're going to go ahead and have 3 entities in our table. So I'm going to go ahead and bring those out. Now, once these are set up, notice that it has a primary key designation. So you'll want to put the primary key field there and then all your other attributes here. So to change this, all you do is double click on it, and it allows you to change the titles of that. So there's the student. The attribute, the primary key on this is going to be the student number. And then we might have the students, let's say student F name. We might have student, well, L name. And anytime you need to add an attribute, what you do is you go over here to the shapes menu, you grab the attribute, and you drag it in and you drop it where you need it. And so I'm going to drop this at the bottom, and let's say that we're going to ask for the student middle name. So that sets up our entity there. I'm going to do that real quick for all of ours. This is going to be the enroll table. We're going to have a composite key here just to show you how it's done. So we'll have a class code here. And I'm going to bring in another primary key attribute and add that there. And we'll have the student num be our other primary key. And so notice that it'll automatically mark that as primary key if we bring it in using the primary key attribute. And so here we're just going to have one attribute, whatever grade the student earned in that class, which means I don't need this attribute. So I can click on it, hit the delete key on my keyboard, and it'll automatically adjust the size of my entity. So then let's go ahead and scroll down and look at our last one. This is going to be our class entity. The class ID is going to, or class number, I guess, since we've stuck with that. Then I'm going to have class section. So in other words, if you're in this class, you might be in BCIS 4301, but section 010 of it. We're going to have the class code if we have an identifying code. We're going to bring in some more attributes. Let's have class time, and let's have class location, and then we will bring in another foreign key if we were filling this all the way out, which would add us allow us to link to the professor teaching it. But we're not going to go ahead and complete that whole relationship. We're just going to do the relationships between these three tables. So that's how we set up our entities with our attributes. We have the table that it's going to be. We select what our primary key is going to be and put it in the primary key designation. We'll also designate foreign keys. And so in this situation, student num is going to link up to this student num, and class code here is going to link up to class code here. Actually, that's wrong. Let's just go ahead and delete that. It's going to link up to class num. All right, so let's do that way. All right, so these are also going to act as foreign keys, and I can designate that relationship by right-clicking this, and I can also tell it that I want to set it as a foreign key. And I can do that with both of those. Okay, and so that shows our relationship between those fields and the tables. All right, so that sets up our entities. It defines realistically what our fields are going to act as. And now we can bring in our relationship. So we have to set a couple of things on this relationship. We need to set the cardinality, in other words, is it a one to many, a zero to many, things like that. And we'll also need to set the designation, the word designation, so where a student will enroll in. So let's go ahead and pull this out onto this. Now notice when I select it, it has these little circles on the end that show the connectors. But by default, what it does is it has a one to many, zero, it's one and zero to many connector on that end, showing the cardinality. So since this relationship, a student can enroll in many classes, what we're going to do is we're going to drag that end to this table. And when I get to this green square, what that does is that docks that onto the edge of that entity. And so when I move my tables around, it leaves those things in place. And so I'm going to do the same with the other end. I'm going to go ahead and drag this across to that. So now I have my one to many relationship. So this right here says that one student can enroll in zero to many classes. Okay. We could have a student in the database who needs to stay in the database for some reason but isn't enrolling in classes. So that's why we have this end connector. Okay, now if we wanted to change that, what we can do is we can click on the line. We can right click on it and we can set our beginning symbol or we can set our end symbol. So if we wanted to make it to where they had to enroll in one or more, we can change it from zero or more to one or more, and we would see that change in the end of the relationship. So what you'll have to do in yours is you've already looked at two of the things, and you'll have two more problems to look at where you'll look at the relationships between these entities. And then what you'll do is you'll express that relationship, the cardinality between that here. And so let's go ahead and get another relationship on the ground. It's pretty much the same thing, that a class can have one to many relationship. And so what I will do is I will drag this connector here. I'll drag this connector here, and then we'll go ahead and leave that relationship as is. And so if I were to drag these things around, you can tell that as a result, those lines will stay stuck to those. So let's also talk about some of the other things you might want to change about the line. If you want to put in the verbs or the relationships between there, you can double click on the middle of the line, and you can say that a student enrolls in, and that classes have enrollments. Okay. If you want to change the formatting of any of this, you can right click on the line and choose right click, and you can, oops, I missed it. Yep. Right click on it and click styles, and you can come up here, or you can actually get this up here on the main menu here, but you can come in here and you can set the weight of your line. So if you want it to be a little bit thicker, you can do that. If you want to increase the font size on this, all you do is double click on that and you can right click on it, and then you can increase your font size there. Okay, and the one thing you want to do when setting up your ERDs, and this can get challenging as you add more entities to it, you do want to make sure that you have a nice layout. When you start crossing lines like this, you start to have problems of trying to tell where one line ends and where another line ends. So when you're laying things out, particularly as it gets more complicated, make sure that your relationship lines don't intersect if possible. All right. So let's talk about some other things that you might need to do in your design. If you want to indicate true cardinality and you want to do it with a parenthetical notation like you see in some of the examples, this is not commonly done in crow's fit, but you will see it done. What you can do is you can right click on the line and you can choose show multiplicity. This is the easiest way just to get something to edit on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the upper levels, and what I can do is I can then click on this, and then in parentheses I can put in my cardinality that's determined by my business rules. And so in this case, what I can do is I can say that a student can enroll in 0 to 7. I just made that up. This is not really the best example of cardinality because this table would have everything they'd enrolled in throughout their whole career. But let's say for some reason our degree plan only requires 7 classes. So they can enroll in 0 to 7 classes. And then here they'll have 1 class, but it'll have an enrollment. Now, if this were in a real database class, then the N might be determined by the class location and you'd have to deal with that. But in a theoretical area right now, this is the best way to set that up. So the other thing you might need to do, and in this case we actually have strong relationships between these because our primary key is established here as a primary key, but let's pretend like we wanted to have this be a weak relationship in our ERD model. So in other words, let's say we had a completely different primary key and these two fields were down here as attributes. That means that the relationship established between these two things would be weak instead of this composite key that's made up of our 2 primary keys. So if I wanted to show that with a dashed line, what I could do is I could again right click on this design and I can change this from set identifying to not set identifying, and what it'll do is it'll change that line to a dashed line. And so if you move that over, you see that that changes that relationship. So what's expected of you in your homework is to get all of your entities in place, get all the attributes in place. You need to define the primary key and any foreign keys that you have in your tables. You'll need to establish the relationship with the correct cardinality symbols on the end of that, and then you'll need to identify any weak relationships. But once you do this, you just go up to File, you do a Save As, and then just save it wherever you want to, and then you're going to send that Visio file to me. So that is it for your intro to Visio, how to get started on your ER diagrams, and we'll move on to advanced modeling in the next chapter.